How do pod people? 2021 has gone off to a bumpy start for us at Diminished Returns, so instead of our previously announced episode, we're releasing a re-edited version of our first ever episode from 2016 for you. Think of it like a George Lucas special edition. Hopefully we'll be back on track soon, and in the meantime, our endorsement of this franchise is not an endorsement of heavy-handed policing.
You're listening to Diminished Returns, the podcast about sequels, prequels, spin-offs, and reboots. I'm Chris Scott, and across from me
is the man with the plan, Mr. Alan Johnson.
How do pod people? We're looking at the final film in the Dirty Harry series, 1988's The Deadpool. In Don Siegel's original classic Dirty Harry from 1971, we would see the titular detective on the trail of Scorpio, a psychotic assassin attempting to hold San Francisco to ransom. It would become the fourth highest grossing film of that year and give its star, Clint Eastwood, one of his most iconic and quotable characters, the uncompromising and brutal Dirty Harry Callahan. An unorthodox, if seemingly effective public servant, the film's success would see it spawn 4 sequels between 1973 and 1988.
The original Dirty Harry.
Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
Magnum Force.
Man's got to know his limitations.
The Enforcer. And Sudden Impact.
Go ahead. Make my day.
With each subsequent film more successful than the last, with the grim Sudden Impact becoming the highest grossing of the franchise. The Deadpool, however, would only just recoup its budget at the box office, and while across the series Harry had faced off against ripped from the headline serial killers, common crooks, vigilante cops, a Vietnam veteran terrorist squad, and Sandra Locke's murderous revenge spree, an ageing star and changing tastes in moviegoers just proved to be too big a case to crack, and the Deadpool would become the last outing for Clint's iconoclastic cop.
So you think you know what Dirty Harry's up to? Well, take another look. Clint Eastwood is Dirty Harry. He's just learned a new game. The Deadpool.
So the Deadpool, Chris, I remember this film from being a teenager purely on the basis of a remote control car chase and Jim Carrey singing a Guns N' Roses song.
And now it's so much more.
Get into that later, but I do feel it is so much more. So the premise for the film is that there's a film production underway, and the crew
What's the film called, Alan?
It's called Hotel Satan.
Ooh.
That needs, for no other reason than a plot device, a music video tie-in. The film crew are playing this eponymous game, The Deadpool, whereby they each choose a list of 10 celebrity names of people that are on high-risk lifestyles or professions. We find out Dirty Harry himself is on one of these lists. And
number 8, I believe.
which is uncovered when they begin to investigate the death of the star of the music video. This is so convoluted. The star of the music video.
Yeah, it's your classic Hollywood manoeuvre of you're making a horror film and you want to have a music video that takes place in the horror film, so somebody gets a free music video. By the sounds of it, what's going to happen is you're going to watch this horror film, and halfway through, the rock star who's called Johnny Square, played by James Carrey, as he is in the credits, which, as I'm sure you've figured out, is Jim Carrey, because that would be my first choice as well, to play a kind of Axl Rose-like rock god, would be rubber-faced goon Jim Carrey.
As much as Guns N' Roses were a part of this film, the Jim Carrey character...
It's Ozzy or Alice or something
I
like that.
actually thought it was Johnny Thunders.
Oh, really?
Backcombed hair. It's Johnny Thunders. He's just not playing guitar. The film itself was used as a vehicle for Guns N' Roses. They actually pushed up the release of the Appetite for Destruction album with the backing of this film.
Because, of course, you really want to have that low-selling rock group Guns N' Roses getting the success of The Deadpool.
Everyone just saw it as a cash-in. The band hadn't released the album yet, so they just thought, well, we're going to be in a big Hollywood movie. As we've said before, like, each of the films has made back money. It's going to be a smash hit. You know, you put those two things together. No one knew that this was going to be at box office, like the disappointment it was. I'm sure Guns N' Roses only saw positives from being attached to Harry Callahan.
And spoiler alert, if we haven't already mentioned it, Johnny Squares does die. He's murdered in a really, really interesting way, where the bad guy gives him an inhaler, as they discover later on, that's laced with some sort of synthetic drug. It's really boring and shitty, but then at the funeral scene you do see Slash and, I don't know, some other guys from Guns N' Roses who I didn't recognise.
Yeah, well, weirdly, Axl's there.
Is he? I didn't notice.
It must have been cathartic for him to see the guy that replaced him in the band been put in a hole in the ground.
Do you mind, gentlemen? I happen to be at a funeral.
I'd like to talk to you about your list.
It's no big secret. Most of the cast and crew knew about it. I didn't tell you because the Deadpool is just a harmless game.
Sounds pretty sick to me.
Johnny Squares is starring in the film, which seems to be some kind of Exorcist knockoff. Film crew are playing this game. He's the first victim of this serial killer who is killing the names on the director of the film's list, which brings in Harry Callahan and his recently attached partner, Al Quan.
Al Quan. He's an Asian man in an 80s film. Does he do karate? You bet your ass he does. Hello, Al. Shall we have some scene where Harry kills 3 guys, 1 guy escapes, and then you do some martial arts so that we can all just really get how Asian you are? It's the racist 80s, everyone.
Do you think they just brought in the martial arts guy because Harry's too old to chase people down on foot now?
There is a lot of kind of cutaways when he's running after people. Like the scene where there's a robbery in a Chinese restaurant, and basically Harry goes in and has a sit down while it's happening. He's sitting at a booth and he's brilliantly sitting next to some woman. Like, so he's on the outside of the booth and she's on the inside, and he's seen the robbery happening. He's come in through the back door to stop the robbery, but had to sit down and pinned in this poor woman who's just sat there for a meal before he goes and kills people.
You think he's going to put in on a tip? The poor thing about Al Quan is, you look back over Harry's partner list and it's like Spinal Tap's drummers. The career prospects there are not good.
Yeah.
You're looking at severe gardening accidents, choking on someone else's vomit.
That's actually one of the things I like about the Dirty Harry series. Even from the start, when you watch the first one, they're already setting up that all his partners die.
In the first movie, he's already got 2 partners that one's been hospitalised and the other one is...
Yeah, I think one of them's dead, one of them's hospitalised. So they're already setting up a running gag for a series they didn't know was going to be a series. and I think this goes through all of the sort of Dirty Harry thing. Most of the kind of cliched nonsense we think about Maverick Cop shows or Maverick Cop films all kind of starts with these films. And that's why they're brilliant, because they see, it's, all his partners die, his woman's dead, he's just antagonistic, in those, first 3 films, it's brilliant because these are the start of these cliches. The second and third films have so many wee bits that became kind of 80s cliches and sort of hacky premises and things. Whereas by the time the Deadpool comes out, the rest of action movie cinema has caught up. Basically, we're already sick of the Dirty Harry cliches, whereas before it was ahead of its time.
It's perceived that that's the problem with the box office, is that by the time the Deadpool came along, and in the same month that Deadpool came out, Die Hard came out.
That's like your Nirvana to your Guns N' Roses.
But I sort of noted down a couple of tough guy action films that had come out around the time. Rambo 3 came out in, I think, the same year. Schwarzenegger's output around that time was odd. He released Red Heat and Twins.
So he's on a roll.
Yeah.
All classics. Agreed.
All of these sort of one-man machines are taking down predators and...
Instead of the sexual predators that Harry takes down.
By the 5th film, Harry now is the target. He's become in some ways the victim. We learn early in the film that Harry's testified against a mob boss. The mob boss now has put a hit on Harry's life. So we find Harry attacked by this incompetent Uzi-wielding mob guy.
Yeah, it's what I like about it in every film, it seems to increase the amount of people that want to kill Harry. First film, it's really just a bad guy and he just keeps finding himself in robberies, and by the end of it, it's just like he can't even go out for dinner without some, a bunch of Uzi wielding.
He's got a real knack of just arriving at the scene of a crime.
Also, whenever he goes to eat, whenever you see Harry going for a bite to eat or something, there's a hijacking in the second one. I like to think that he never gets a full meal, as he's always having to, he stops in for a Subway sandwich and he's got to kill like 3 gangbangers or something.
That's how he stays trim.
And to be fair, he looks pretty good.
Clint was 58 in this movie.
Wow. And it shows.
They're sort of acknowledging the fact that Eastwood's old. He's certainly slowing down. So the pace of the film's changed. I quite like that this feels like a contained arc of a character. From the first film to this film, it seems like a story.
Yeah.
And as Eastwood said when he was asked about coming back for a sequel, he was like, the sequel would be Harry fly fishing somewhere, because he knows that the next step for Callahan is retirement.
Yeah, yeah.
So I like the arc of Harry from when he's up against Scorpio till now when he is knocking at retirement's door.
Yeah.
And so I like that he slowed down. I also like that the film itself is a more standard procedural.
It's actual police work rather than just running out and shooting people. I mean, that's the thing. I think there's a lot of really nice ideas in the film. I don't think it actually really pulls any of them off, to be honest with you. I like the obviously kind of intellectual idea for what, and intellectual is used very loosely here, is that for the first 4 films he's the outlaw and he's the rebel, and now as we're in the late 80s where perhaps it is a less liberal time, Harry actually is a hero in the city, where before he was the brass didn't like him, whereas now the brass want him to be head of PR or something stupid like that, and that's all quite a nice idea. I just don't know if it works for a Dirty Harry film, in the same way that there's obviously meant to be a subtext, and again, subtext is used loosely here because it's pretty much in the text, that the media glorify violence and are salacious and things like that, but it doesn't really do anything with it. Like, they'll have a speech. He has a speech with what's her name, Patricia Clarkson, is that her name?
Patricia Clarkson, who obviously has been in great stuff. My personal favourite, The Station Agent. Everybody's got to start somewhere.
I believe it's her second film, the Deadpool. Yeah, but so they have they'll have conversations where Harry's telling her how, a gutter journalist and stuff like that. And then, of course, like any woman who's been lectured to by any pretty perky young woman who's been lectured to by a 58-year-old, grumpy old man, she's like, hey, let's go to dinner. Because that's pretty much how life works. Yeah.
What's good about the media thing is it predates the sort of world we live in now, the TMZ world. It's like 5 or 7 years before O.J. Simpson.
What happened to O.J. Simpson?
Good evening. O.J. Simpson, one of America's best-known sports and entertainment personalities, remains secluded in his Los Angeles home tonight as reports and rumors about his possible connection to his ex-wife's murder are getting wide play.
Okay, from The Naked Gun.
That guy. Everything about the O.J. trial, the pursuit, the trial, all catalogued on TV. And so it sort of predates, it's around the time of Geraldo Rivera, loads of true crime stuff. It's quite prescient,
I think, as I say, there's a lot of good ideas. It's like everyone's went, we should totally bring in the press and we should make it different from the other Harry films. Because of that, it just doesn't feel so much like a Dirty Harry film. It feels like that could have been a movie about anyone else, whereas I don't think Sudden Impact would have worked as any other film and I know it wasn't written originally as a Dirty Harry film, it was written as a vehicle for Sandra Locke. The way the film came out, that only works as a Dirty Harry film because it's kind of mental but also awesome, and it works because of the strength of the character and the history of the first few films. Whereas this film, I think you could have put anyone in that film and it would be another average 80s thriller, and that's just what it is to me. It's just an average 80s thriller that just happens to have, there's Clint Eastwood, he's really cool. That's it. I only watched it last night, so it's still a little raw for me, you have to understand, I've not got the emotional distance yet. After watching all of the Dirty Harry films in quite close succession, it's such a drop in quality. I mean, it's like Sudden Impact. I expected to be a drop because I didn't remember much about it. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
It's quite jarring to watch them sequentially now go from quite grim content in Sudden Impact to what is quite light and frivolous in the Deadpool. It's almost like pastiche. So it does feel a little raw. It does feel a little predictable.
Yeah. And I mean, like those first few films, all the films apart from the Deadpool really, are like nasty, exploitation-y. Like every single film is brutal, and like, even the first one, which you think now, when you look back and it should be kind of almost quaint, because of the cliches and because of maybe the time difference. The first hour of that is just, by the way, there's random killings, deal with it, life is shitty. Second film, the people that are meant to protect you are like shooting people, the enemy within, which after that, the Enforcer, a bombing campaign in the streets, and they even bomb like some police building as well in it and things like that. And again, it's all that taut sort of filmmaking. Sudden Impact is about the, revenge killings for a brutal sexual assault. And then you get the Deadpool, which is where Jim Carrey gets an inhaler. It just doesn't. And the fact as well is that I think the thing that elevated the Dirty Harry films as well as having a great main character, the bad guys were always wild, and you don't really see the bad guy in this film. In the Deadpool, it's always, it's like not a Columbo episode because you always know who did that. That's the worst example ever.
So it's Murder, She Wrote with a .44 Magnum.
Yeah, exactly.
So
that's
the
it, yeah.
elderly crime sleuth is on the trail of an unknown assailant.
Yeah, and so you don't get to see the bad guy's face and things like that. And so there's no character there. There's no real danger until whatever it is, 3/4 of the way through. And I don't think we have mentioned that Liam goddamn Neeson is in this film as the film director.
Yeah, Liam Neeson. It's early in his Hollywood career, pre-Darkman. He has some weird accent. I get he's meant to be like an exotic British director, but just have him be Irish. Just let him be Liam.
Yeah.
And interestingly, obviously, Liam Neeson now in present day is essentially doing what Callahan or Eastwood wanted to stop doing. He didn't want to be the old guy chasing down bad guys.
Liam Neeson has a particular set of skills, just not accents in this case.
What you were saying there about the actual crime, were you taken in by that at all? Within the film, there's a potential that it's Liam Neeson's character who is killing the victims on the list. You know, did that work for you?
So
that it suggests that Liam Neeson's the bad guy.
I mean, the first sort of scene is sort of setting up so that when you see Liam Neeson, you go, all right, Liam Neeson's the bad guy. But then after that, it's so obviously not him because they lay it on too thick. It's like, hey, don't you think it's Liam Neeson? But they never show you his face. So if it was Liam Neeson, they would have just shown you his face. I mean, again, it's just such a misstep for me because the first film, the Scorpio Killer, is this wild, creepy and scary guy. In fact, creepy and scary is pretty much what they go for throughout the whole series to lesser degrees. It ends up being some guy with some real mental problem,
but again,
and you don't even see him until like the last 20 minutes. So it's just
Hollywood
a
dealing
figure.
Again really sensitively with mental illness.
Yeah.
It just, of course, everybody that's schizophrenic has this like split personality where one can do the shopping and cook your dinner and the other's going to stab your eyes out with knit needles. It's really sensitively handled.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly where I would want to see the important conversation about mental health go, to a Dirty Harry film, you know.
Seeing him pinned to a wall by a harpoon.
Yeah, exactly. So it does end, which, to be fair, is awesome, with Dirty Harry walking out with a harpoon and basically shoots the guy, and so he's left hanging on a wall, and he has the classic final line as he walks away, and his chief comes up and goes, you know, where's the suspect? And he says something along the lines of, he's hanging around back there. Come on!
For me, the odd thing about that, the second star of the Dirty Harry franchise has been a Smith & Wesson.
Well, he has to give it up.
He gives it up, and so I thought that was quite interesting that the bad guy has Harry's appendage and he's using it against him. I thought that was quite interesting.
Again, that's quite a nice sort of, you know, Harry's given up the gun that's given him all this power, and you know, I'm sure there's other things we could think about with guns and men, I'm sure, but you know, I can't think of any of them now. But at the end, it is just him walking out with a badass harpoon and shooting the guy, which is quite cool. I'm not complaining.
Did that sequence in any way remind you of Commando, the Schwarzenegger classic?
I haven't seen Commando for a while. The only things I remember about it strongly are, is I believe his daughter watches a Culture Club or Boy George video, and he says, "Why don't they call him Girl George?" So there's that. That's pretty much, and that's pretty much all I remember about Commando.
Well, the final fight with Bennett takes place in like an engine room. So
oh yes,
room filled with steam. They have a bit of a knife fight, and then Bennett's impaled.
That's right.
And there's a quip, and the same beats happen at the finale here. There's a bit of a knife fight. Eastwood impales the bad guy, walks off, and lays down a little quip. I just thought that it was interesting in that how many of these beats sort of echoed other Hollywood action films of the time. It felt like I'd seen that. Obviously, I had seen it before, but I feel like I'd seen it.
Yeah, it's just another dumb film. And I think that's the thing, that those first few films are also kind of weirdly idiosyncratic. First one, the amount of things in that I've seen either ripped off or had a homage from different movies. I mean, it's pretty much every scene you go, oh, that's where that came from. Oh, that's where that comes from. I mean, the second film, Magnum Force, is the one I remember the most. There's a bit that I remember like going on for ages, and when I watched it as an adult, it went on for 10 seconds, but it's the pool party, and you see some boobs, and then the woman gets shot in the boobs, and as like a 10-year-old boy, when I saw this, I was like, boobs, violence.
You were now a 10-year-old man?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I was like, boobs and violence, this is great. This is breaking new ground for awesomeness. There's all these sort of like iconic, brilliant moments. The Deadpool just doesn't, you know, you go, it was all right. You know, it was kind of fun when he shoots him with a harpoon. But like you say, you know, it's already been done in Commando, which is certainly a, you know, it at least goes full pelt with being a crazy 80s action movie, whereas this just doesn't cut it anymore, I don't think.
The thing that I remember from watching this as, you know, a teenager, sort of 12 or 13, was the car chase. That's the one sort of fond memory I have, is a car chase when Harry and his partner are chased by a remote control vehicle which has an explosive in it. That's the fond memory I have of the Deadpool. When I think of the film, that's the scene in the sequence that I think of. But I didn't know then, which I do know now, it's aping the car chase from Bullet.
Yeah.
Which,
and it's actually it's quite cool.
In of itself, the car chase from Bullet is iconic. So then to reference it in another San Francisco car chase,
but with a toy car,
is fun within the film. But for Harry, it's now reusing ideas. It's very slyly self-referential.
Yeah,
the stories. It's almost been made in this bubble though, where it doesn't reflect actual San Francisco. So it seems odd that they're filming a horror film in San Francisco, and also filming portions of it in daylight, which really sort of the big nightmare sequence, which foreshadows the harpoon, takes place during the day.
Yeah,
the film has all of this stuff going on that if it was to be made now, which of course it couldn't be, it would be seen as being very meta, like touching base within.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing. Again, like, it has a lot of good ideas, a lot of interesting stuff that could be made out of that film. This is sort of stuck between the kind of, all right, Dirty Harry legacy, for want of a word, of trying to be a part of those films, but also doing that commentary and having that extra layer. And I also don't think the script or the direction is competent enough to pull it off either. I think if you got somebody, because I believe this is directed by Clint Eastwood's stunt double, and not badly directed by any stretch of the imagination, not like the worst written film you'll ever see. It's just pretty average, whereas if you really needed some, young Tyro to come in, and if they were going to do it right, do it 100%. And it just seems stuck between a Dirty Harry film and a more modern action film, and it's neither fish nor fowl.
Now, interestingly, Siskel and Ebert, the legendary American film critics, they both give this a thumbs up. Ebert describes it as being the wittiest of the Dirty Harry films.
Can I just ask? They're both dead now, right?
Yeah.
Good.
Gene Siskel says it's the best Dirty Harry film since the original.
Mental.
And Leonard Maltin gives it 2.5 stars.
That seems about right.
He says it's surprisingly watchable, if not inspired.
Yeah, that's it. Well done, Leonard. You fucking nailed that. Yeah, wow. 2 thumbs up.
Two thumbs up. I think that's what makes the Deadpool justified in its place in the franchise. I think content-wise, it maybe doesn't measure up remotely to the previous 4, but the advancement of Harry as a character, when the film finishes and he's done his business, he's saved Patricia Clarkson, which has obviously just united them forever, and they walk off.
Well, for 20 years until he's put in a home.
She might just see out his twilight years in a basket chair just by the coast or something.
Oh,
but
that's adorable.
I do see them walking off and that being the beginning of like the new Harry chapter. And I know a lot of people in this sort of like retconning of movies see Gran Torino as the final Dirty Harry film.
Yeah.
Which I can understand that, he's an ornery old man. He's sort of, takes matters into, under his own control. I choose not to believe that. I want Harry to have found what was missing in his life.
A young perky reporter.
Yeah, I mean, the age thing is odd. There's no way she's going to fall for someone her dad's age, but...
Yeah, there should be a scene where he meets her dad and it's just a guy that looks like him.
It's just awkward.
Like they fought in the same unit in Korea.
He gets brought back into the captain's office to be shouted down, not about his crazy cop antics, but because he's dating his daughter.
I mean that's the other thing as well. Like, you're meant to believe that Patricia Clarkson's like, oh, aye, look at this fine figure of a man, and yet the films before that, like in Magnum Force, where he has a character which probably isn't named, but was certainly, when they were writing it, they just named Hot Asian Girl, comes up and has 2 lines of dialogue with him. The first one is like, are you a cop? Second line is, how do I sleep with a cop? But you can imagine it because he's still a kind of cool, he's the Shagnum Force. Thank you everyone, thank you. But by the time it gets to that, it becomes just ridiculous. I mean, Patricia Clarkson's probably wanting to go out and, this was 1988, she's probably wanting to go out and watch, Wasp and Poison, and he wants to sit and listen to Charlie Parker. It's just not going to work. It's not going to work, Alan.
So you think she's just using him to get to Guns N' Roses?
Yeah, that's it. This high-paid media professional is using the detective to try and break into the showbiz world. Absolutely.
You don't learn a great deal about her as a person. Her life up until this point you don't really know about.
But we can assume she has dad issues.
Well, that's certainly the easy write-off for the story. That's what I want from this film. It feels flabby, it feels slower, it's not as inspired as the previous films. So I do think that Harry hanging up the shoulder holster and going off with a lady into the sunset, I think that's what I want from the Deadpool at this point. A young movie watcher, just think remote control car chases, where can it go from here? Yeah. Now watching the series, I'm happy. That arc is perfect. It would be impossible to remake Dirty Harry and insert like Tom Hardy in.
That's what I was going to ask. Because inevitably somebody's going to try it. Hollywood would try and do it if they could. If you had to, you've got a 44 Magnum at your head. Modern day actors, who would be Who would be Dirty Harry?
I'm not picking one. I don't think it's ever going to happen, and I'll tell you why. The media attention on police brutality with the chokehold and the Ferguson riots, the police aren't seen in a great light these days, especially now with everyone having a camera, access to immediate, like, generate your own news footage app. No one's going to see a film that's based on police brutalism. No one. Also, San Francisco itself as a community tried to block the subsequent films when made. They didn't like how San Francisco was represented. They didn't like Dirty Harry.
What, really? Because they're all represented as peace-loving.
They seem like a bunch of bank robbing, restaurant toppling.
It's one of those things where obviously you also have to look at it in the time that it's in. You know, like, it's basically pushing hot buttons. You know, throughout the whole series, apart from the last one, of course, you know, it's Harry against the system, and they talk about how the system's going to let the bad guy go, and then it cuts to like a CND sign or something spray painted on the wall, sort of saying, yeah, that's what happens if you like nuclear disarmament, you're going to let killers go free. And I mean, it's also ridiculous. And also, I don't think anything like Clint actually believes, but you know, that's the character of Dirty Harry, is this sort of misanthropic, doesn't like anyone, and so they're just sort of subbing in different things, you know, for that. So, you know, in the third one, he has to deal with a woman and her ovaries, you know,
I find
but
that...
he grows to, but they're smart enough to, at the end, he grows to respect her once she dies, of course.
Yeah,
but
it's unfortunate. I really think that is one of the best aspects to The Enforcer, is the relationship between him and Tyne Daly, who obviously made the film 10 years before she was in Cagney and Lacey. But that's another aspect of, there we are in a subsequent film, Harry's grown.
Yeah,
you know, he's grown again. Being with Al Quan, like he just accepts that he's a Korean American. It's not important to him.
Yeah.
Whereas in the first film, it's a bit of an issue when he has a Latino partner.
Latino college boy. It's like two annoying things to Harry there. But I mean, again, even in that, he likes the guy by the end of it, you know. And I think it's that sort of thing of, you know, you don't want to see a well-adjusted policeman picture. I don't want to see a Dirty Harry film where he's a social justice warrior and is really, you know, careful with his language and how he treats people. That film will be dull as shit. You know, Dirty Harry runs about, says awful things, kills people, but in the end, you know, he's actually quite a good guy.
You're off the case, McGonagall. You're off your case, Chief. What does that mean exactly?
It means he gets results, you stupid chief!
Dad, sit down.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Obviously, each of the films has had a defining line. There's a monologue about, well, did I fire 5 or 6? You know,
yeah.
Well, you got to ask yourself. You know, so each film has had a little quote attached to it. Man's got to know his limitations.
Nice.
Go ahead, mate, day. Interestingly, I couldn't decipher what the specific Dirty Harry line was in this film. The prevailing feeling on the internet is it's the "you're shit out of luck."
Shit out of luck, yeah, totally. Because
it recurs.
Yes, it does the same thing as the first one, where he says it once, foiling a crime that's not connected really to the main crime, and then when he does the bad guy at the end, he says the same thing. Is it just
like a comedian testing out material?
It's a callback.
He refines it by the end of the show. He's just got it.
I like to think that before he goes out on a case, he's got a notebook full of lines crossed out, and like, God, is this going to work? You know, what kind of crowd am I going to get? Is this a college crowd that I'm shooting today? Or
well, in my notes here, that's the thing. I wonder, actually, like, he's throwing out quotes throughout this film as if like he knows it's the last movie. He's going to get all the good lines out the way so that, you know, we've just taken care of them all. Obviously, there's opinions are like assholes. My favourite one was like, you got to tie that necktie so tight you're gonna.
No, I'm gonna kick your ass so hard you're gonna have to loosen your necktie to shit.
See, perfect.
Beautiful.
I do just feel that it's everything about the film just points to the fact that he knows this is his last case. Once he gets back and does the paperwork that he's not done for 5 films. This is it, it's done. He's out.
Oh, actually, another thing that I quite liked about Al Quan is that most of his role is basically looking at Harry after he does something, you know, some wacky hijinks like killing 3 people or something, and just sort of making a face to camera. It's like, what you gonna do? He's such a character. There's like a bit where they're working out in the gym, and Harry
scopes a lady.
Harry
in
turns
the gym.
around to just basically pervert a woman while leaving Al Quan trying to lift up some massive weight.
Clint, you'd have thought he'd an effective spotter, but you know, who knew? He would just disregard you for a lady in lycra.
Dirty Harry is a dirty bastard.
Anyway, the relationship with Harry and Al, each time that there's an appropriate moment to drop some pun or quip, Al wants to get in on that act.
Oh yeah, he's pretty funny. Yeah.
Harry at this point now as a character has seen it all, he's said it all, and so he's finishing Al's jokes for him. I quite like how that works. Like, Al's a new guy on the scene, although sometimes it did seem that Harry was just there to have the gun and Al was the one that would, you know, he would go and canvass the witnesses. He'd turn up the clues. oh, Harry, I found this list that your name's on. It happens to be the list of all the people that have died up to this point
Harry's
in the film.
the Inspector Gadget, and Al's the what's it, his niece or daughter or whatever. God, I can't remember how Inspector Gadget goes. Anything else you want to say about the Deadpool in particular, or the Dirty Harry series?
After the Deadpool, he only makes, I'd say, 2 more films that would sort of slip into the action hero role. In the Line of Fire, which I think we can all agree is he's too old to be a Secret Serviceman.
Yeah, though, and I haven't seen that probably since it came out on VHS, but they also do reference it quite a lot, don't they? They don't make a lot of references that he's an old geezer now.
He's experienced.
All right. For those of you who can't see Alan, air quotes there when he said experienced. Nice.
But the rookie, where he essentially plays the gruff cop again, he is positioned as the old guy who's got to teach the young guy the ropes.
Yeah. Every action movie we grew up watching is pretty much influenced by the Dirty Harry series. I mean, actually, in the Deadpool, I'm pretty sure in the same scene, in the chief's office, there's like his chief and I don't know, like the mayor's aide or something. In the space of like 2 minutes, one of them says, "You're a dinosaur, Callahan." And the other one says, "Your methods are unconventional, to say the least, but you get results." That's everything I want in a film.
Doing research for this, apparently Frank Miller, our favourite used to be cool guy, now raging lunatic, when he saw the Deadpool, he was so disgusted he stormed out the cinema, obviously made some public claim about how this wasn't Harry Callahan, this wasn't a Dirty Harry film, which apparently that's where Sin City, That Yellow Bastard comes from. The Hartigan character is actually based on Dirty Harry, and that's what Frank Miller envisaged for what happens to Dirty Harry after Sudden Impact.
Wow.
That's why within the Sin City films, Nancy's name is given as Nancy Callahan.
Ah, right. Okay. I didn't know that. I love the fact that Frank Miller was like, "I can't believe you took a beloved character and ruined it. The man that made the fucking Spirit." Man has a fucking cheek. Frank Miller, if you're listening, and I know you are, go run in front of a bus.
Get in the sea.
Get in the sea. Anything else about Dirty Harry? The classics that Clint does like putting his sexual partners in films. You've got Sandra Locke, you've got Francis Fisher, Clyde, the monkey. But
Orangutan,
whatever the fuck, who cares?
Doesn't have a tail.
What am I, a zoologist?
No tail, ape.
Okay. Educational as well, this podcast.
You would have picked that up watching Planet of the Apes as well.
Planet of the Monkeys. Yeah, I was really surprised when I found out that Clint, who you think is being maybe quite right-wing and reactionary, is actually a big fan of like Planned Parenthood and women should have the right to their own bodies, and I think that's great. But yes, I believe I think it was Sandra Locke where supposedly about to win a massive settlement from him in court, and he suddenly settled. He dragged his heels and took her to court, and when it looked like he was about to lose, then settled. And supposedly he tried to buy her off with a deal with the studio, which would never appeared and was fake and things like that. So although I think they might, I think there might have been a lot of long-standing problems there, which is why he's brought in Patricia Clarkson, and also kind of good-looking redhead, much like Francis Fisher, which is his next paramour. So perhaps he was, trying it on with Patricia. If I was a 58-year-old man, I would probably be that sleazy as well. So again, he's a man just like you and me, Alan.
How do you rank the franchise?
Right, okay. Right, so last is definitely the Deadpool by a margin. Then the one with Cagney and or Lacey.
Enforcer.
Yeah. It's actually still fun, but it's probably a touch below Sudden Impact. I find it really hard. I would probably say it's really hard to put Sudden Impact, Magnum Force, and Dirty Harry. They're all three. I really, really enjoyed all of them, and I actually really did enjoy the Enforcer as well. But it's maybe just the proverbial ball hair below, and the Deadpool is a proverbial giant bush below because it's not very good.
Well, for me, haven't seen them all again.
I'm going to suggest that you have a list already written about this, don't you?
No, I'm just going now in my head. For me, Dirty Harry and Magnum Force top the pile. Having seen the Deadpool twice now in a short period of time, for rewatchability, just for fun,
right?
I would watch that ahead of Sudden Impact. During portions of that film, it actually reminded me a lot of The Last House on the Left.
Oh, right, okay.
Not quite
yeah,
as
I know what you
brutal,
mean. I know what you mean, but yeah.
Or
it is very
I Spit in Your Grave.
It is very
exploitative,
exploitation-y, yeah, totally.
Let's do some stats.
Oh, right, okay.
So, 1988, directed by Buddy Van Horn.
Great name. already a fan?
Well, his name should suggest his actual position in life. He's not a well-known director by any means. He's directed 2 other Eastwood vehicles in Pink Cadillac and Every Which Way, but he's more notable as Clint Eastwood's stunt double right up until $1 Million Baby, apparently.
Oh, wow, cool.
Now, I think the film looks okay.
Yeah, it's not terrible. It's competent.
Do you think that Clint let him direct this film because he's part of Clint's cabal?
Yeah.
Or is it a Kurt Russell Tombstone scenario where they've hired a director, but it's really Kurt Russell calling the shots, literally?
Wait, does Kurt Russell de facto direct Tombstone? I didn't know about this.
Apparently, he has said, since the guy whose name is on the title has passed away.
Smart move,
Clint,
Kurt.
Kurt has come out and said that he called the shots, that they would at the end of each day's shooting he would send him a shot list for the next day and tell him what he wanted. So could you see that happening? Is that the relationship that Buddy and Clint have? Or Clint said himself he wanted to work with Buddy because he shot fast and that's what he wants?
Yeah, I mean, Clint is notorious. Clint, like I've worked, Clint, and then there's also Bobby as well, my big friend De Niro. But yeah, Clint is well known for not fucking around with his films. A couple of takes, that's it, done. Like you say, shooting fast. But also as well, if they hired somebody who wanted to really make a name for themselves, was like a young talent or whatever, then they might want to do things differently. They might want to do multiple takes. They might want to have stupidly long setups and do lots of different things. Whereas Clint's going to go, Buddy, you're getting this job because you're my mate. We're all going to be home for tea, aren't we? Of course he's going to be like, yes, Mr. Eastwood, of course we are. Because also, if he doesn't, not only does he not get the directing job, his whole bread and butter is being his stunt double. So his whole livelihood is basically tied up with Clint. And that's the thing. It just looks like a generic 80s film. And when you told me that it was his stunt double, you go, yeah, it makes sense. It works as a film, no more, no less.
But interestingly, across the 5 films, each of them begin with a sort of city view of San Francisco and leave with a city view of San Francisco. Of the 5 of them, I actually think the most pleasing visual cityscapes that we see are the ones that Clint himself shoots for Sudden Impact. But it's nice that it's a little running theme through the 5 films.
Yeah, there's always like the camera pans out at the end of every film.
It's
actually,
like
speaking of
these
that,
people still live their lives and you just pan into it and then pan out of it.
Yeah, like I love the fact that in the sort of 2 or 3 years between each Dirty Harry movie, he's killing that same amount of people. It's just you don't get to see it. It's just a bloodbath.
He's still having every meal interrupted by bank robbers.
Yeah, that's it. Every time he nips out for a sandwich. But that's the other thing as well I liked is that, because obviously in the first film, they don't know they're going to make a sequel. And it ends with him throwing his badge into the water. And I love the fact that the second film is just he's back, he's working. Like they should have had a scene the next day after he's thrown his badge in the water and it's like, can I get a new badge? What's up? I threw it, but I need to make my rent and stuff, and I'm not really qualified at anything. So what did you do with your badge? I threw it in the water, guys. I'm really. do you know how much those badges cost? I'm really sorry. There should have been something to it, but it's brilliant. He's just back in. They've probably got like a whole cupboard of Harry Callahan badges because like every week he's throwing them in the water.
Like he's got a backup piece. So he's also just got a backup badge. He's got a spare. But originally when. The original film was written and then John Milius came in to rewrite, and that's where it was relocated to California. Milius is responsible for the gun. But it was very important to Milius that at the end of the film that he did give up. They didn't like the world that Harry existed in, so he wanted them to just reject it and leave.
Right.
I guess like John Wayne at the end of The Searchers, just to, I finished the task.
I'm a man out of time.
Yeah. And walk off. But it was Clint that didn't like that. He wanted to sort of rein that in. I don't think at that time he envisaged coming back because sequels weren't common at that.
Yeah, totally. Well, also as well, I quite like the fact that they're not called Dirty Harry : whatever. I mean, that's mental now. You go, how did people know?
Also, the writers, each of the 5 films have had different writers. This film was written by Steve Sharon, Doug Pearson, and Sandy Shaw.
The Sandy Shaw?
Unfortunately not. Now, the 3 of them wrote the story with Sharon writing the screenplay, but that's the only film they've ever written. They describe Deadpool as being a technological thriller. Which I presume just means because Radio Shack was big and they bought the remote control cars there that it's a technological thriller. It's hardly Lawnmower Man. But
yeah. Oh my god.
then the cast. The only returning character throughout the whole series is Clint Eastwood. There's someone that pops up in 4 out of the 5. Albert Popwell,
which I only noticed between 3 and 4 because he's got two quite like his role kind of seems to get bigger because in what is he in 1?
In 1 he's the guy who's asked if he feels lucky.
Oh yes, right.
So
of
he
course.
pops up then. He's just a low-level street hood.
Yes, is he not the pimp in the second one?
The pimp in the second one
that throws like drain cleaner down the prostitute's gub. These are family films, people. And then in the third one, he's like the Black Power leader guy, and he was really cool in that big part. But then when he comes in on
Sudden Impact, he's like his almost his de facto partner.
It's his friend in the Force. But what I love about it is because he had such a big part in the last one, and they don't actually announce that he's a cop for a wee bit into his introduction at the screen. I was sitting there going, is he pals with the Black Power guy now? This is awesome. This is brilliant that they've made friends across a social and racial divide. And then it's like, no, he's a different guy. And
I couldn't find any information as to why he didn't return for the 5th film. It seems sad.
Yeah. Maybe he looked at it and went, look, Clint, looked at the script, come on, man. I also liked as well when he did walk in, I was checking my privilege like a motherfucker going, is that the same guy? Am I racist or is that the same guy? But he was really cool in all of those each role. Like they're actually kind of
it's quite memorable. It's unusual that he is the quite memorable in each
screen
one.
time exceeds, but even the smallest role is like the first time, as you say, you hear that iconic phrase. I like things like that where they have.
I like how you defer from trying to say it because it's well documented that it's said incorrectly because he doesn't say "Do you feel lucky, punk?" He says
"Play it again, Sam." Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
But also as well, I don't want to start saying it because I'll then try and do a really bad Clint Eastwood impersonation.
Just to go back to Jim Carrey. James Carrey, who got the gig as Axl Rose because Clint Eastwood saw him do his Elvis in Vegas routine.
Right, okay. I mean, when you do see him be Johnny Squares, you think to yourself, hey, he could definitely be the 5th guy in In Living Colour. You know, he's got a real future as like the white guy in a sketch group. But it just doesn't make any sense because he's even acting in the few minutes he has on screen, which are quite pivotal in the film. You know, he acts like Jim Carrey, the Jim Carrey we know and love.
That's what
it's just that he's dressed in like leather or something.
He's mugging along to the song.
Mugging, yeah.
He's awful. But then when he stops and he's talking to the guy about how he's jonesing, it's a good performance. For the few minutes he's there, it's a good performance.
But his actual rock star,
but which is the reason he's there, is awful. Yeah. And the only thing that's good is because he's good at singing out of time, so he's mouthing the words out of sync.
Which is kind of funny. Yeah. I mean, I think they should have just released what was it, Hotel Satan?
Hotel Satan.
They just released Hotel Satan. Their rates are spooky.
And so Clint Eastwood's character, Harry Callahan, over the 5 films, he certainly softens and slows down.
Age withers us all.
I think he's brilliant franchise fodder. We get to know more of him, but not because they over-explain anything. There's not suddenly, they don't bring in like an out-of-town brother or... Like we find, it's not like Rosewood in Beverly Hills Cop 2. He doesn't, suddenly unveil this never before mentioned passion for an unknown thing with Rosewood and his guns. I think the actual arc of the 5 films is really good. I think it really,
absolutely,
it really stands up. And as a group of films, I think they're great.
Basically, the Dirty Harry films, all worth a watch. Everyone apart from the Deadpool, I think, is excellent. And the Deadpool has its pleasures, but I don't think we could recommend it as an actual good film.
I am going to go with Siskel and Ebert. I'm going to give it a thumbs up.
I hope you go the same way, Siskel and Ebert.
Anyway, let's put on our shoulder holsters, our sport coats, and let's pan out over the cityscape of San Francisco.
Yay!
Hey, no end credits gag here. Just a request for you to subscribe, rate and review the podcast, and make sure you tell your friends about it. And follow us under our new name, Diminished Pod, on all the socials. Thanks everyone.